If I had been 1 second later, the city would have buried a king that night. The rain didn't fall. It attacked, sharp and relentless against my windshield, turning every streetlight into a blur of gold and warning. I remember tightening my grip on the steering wheel, my knuckles pale, my breath uneven, like something inside me already knew I shouldn't be there. The parking structure loomed ahead, concrete and shadow, 3 levels of silence where even the echo of tires sounded too loud. I almost kept driving. I should have, but something pulled me in, something I couldn't explain then and still can't fully explain now. My car rolled to a stop about 30 feet from a black sedan parked under a flickering overhead light. It was the kind of car you notice without meaning to. Sleek, expensive, untouched by the world around it. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this unless the person inside owned everything around it. I killed the engine but didn't move. My fingers hovered over the door handle, frozen. That's when I heard it. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. A faint metallic click, out of rhythm with the rain. My heart stuttered. I leaned forward slightly, squinting through the streaks of water on the glass. The black sedan sat perfectly still. No movement, no driver, no sign of life. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew, crawled up my spine like a quiet alarm no one else could hear. Then headlights cut through the entrance behind me. A second car. Dark, tinted windows. It pulled in slow, deliberate, stopping just a few spaces away from the sedan. The driver's door opened, and he stepped out. Even from a distance, I felt it. Not fear. Not exactly. Something heavier. The kind of presence that made the air shift. He moved like someone who never rushed, like time adjusted for him instead of the other way around. Tall, controlled, every step measured. His coat caught the light briefly, expensive fabric absorbing the glow instead of reflecting it. 2 more men stepped out behind him, silent, watchful, scanning everything without turning their heads. I should have looked away. I didn't. My eyes locked onto him like I was trying to understand. Something my mind couldn't process. He walked toward the black sedan, keys already in hand. And that feeling inside me, sharp now, urgent, snapped into something undeniable. Wrong. This was wrong. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My door flew open before I realized what I was doing, the cold air hitting my face as I stumbled out, my shoes slipping slightly on the wet concrete. Don't get in. My voice cut through the rain, louder than I expected, raw and urgent and completely out of place in that quiet, controlled world. Everything stopped. He paused mid-step, turning just enough for me to see his face for the first time. Sharp features. Eyes that didn't just look at you. They assessed, calculated, decided. The kind of gaze that didn't miss anything. The men behind him moved instantly, tension snapping into place, their focus shifting to me like I had just stepped into something I didn't understand. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at him. And for a fraction of a second, something passed between us. Not recognition, not trust, just awareness. Then I ran toward him, closing the distance before doubt could catch up, reaching out without thinking, my hand wrapping around his sleeve, pulling with everything I had. Don't. The word barely left my lips before the world behind him erupted into light. The light swallowed everything for a split second, white and absolute, like the world itself had blinked too hard, and then the sound followed. Not sharp, not violent, but deep, like the ground exhaling under pressure, a force you felt in your chest more than you heard. And I did not realize I was still holding on to him until his hand closed over my wrist, steady, firm, anchoring me in place as the echo faded into the rain. Neither of us spoke, not at first, because there was something heavier than words hanging between us, something that had shifted the moment I pulled him back, something neither of us could undo. The men behind him moved quickly, but with control, stepping forward, scanning, creating a silent barrier that somehow made the space feel smaller, tighter, like I had stepped into a world with rules I did not understand. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened just enough to stop me, not hurting, just enough to remind me that he had decided I was not leaving yet. His eyes found mine again, and this time there was no distance, no blur of rain or light to soften it, just that same sharp focus, like he was trying to read something written beneath my skin. How did you know? He asked, his voice low, calm in a way that did not match what had just happened. And that calm was what unsettled me the most. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first, because the truth sounded impossible even in my own head. I did not. I said finally, my voice unsteady but honest. I just felt it. The words sounded small in the space between us, fragile against the weight of everything else, but I did not look away. Something flickered in his expression, not disbelief, not anger, something quieter, more dangerous, like curiosity, behind him. One of the men spoke into a device, his voice low and controlled, but I could not make out the words, only the tone, urgent without panic. The rain kept falling, steady now, washing over the concrete, over the moment, over me, and I became painfully aware of how close I was standing to him. How out of place I must have looked in my soaked jacket and trembling hands compared to the quiet precision of everything around him. "No one gets that close by accident," he said, more to himself than to me. And then his gaze sharpened again, returning fully, locking me in place. I felt it then. The shift, subtle but undeniable, like a line had been crossed without my permission. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lily." I answered before I could think about whether I should. And something in the way he repeated it, quiet, deliberate, made it feel like it mattered more than it should. "Lily," he said, like he was testing the weight of it, committing it to memory. I swallowed, my pulse still racing, my mind trying to catch up with everything that had just happened, with the fact that I had run toward danger instead of away from it, with the fact that I was still standing here. "I did not mean to get involved," I added quickly, the words spilling out now. "I just saw something, and I thought." "You thought I was about to die," he finished, and there was no emotion in it, just a statement, clean and precise. I hesitated, then nodded, because there was no point pretending otherwise. For a moment, he just looked at me, really looked at me, like he was measuring something unseen, and then, slowly, his hand released my wrist, but the absence of his touch did not feel like freedom. It felt like a decision had been made. "You are already involved," he said quietly, in the way he said it made it sound less like a warning and more like a fact that could not be changed. The rain softened, but the tension did not. It settled into something quieter, heavier, like the air itself had changed around us, and I could feel every second stretching longer than it should. My heartbeat still too loud in my ears as I stood there, soaked, exposed, and completely out of place. The men around him did not relax. They shifted, adjusting positions with subtle precision, their attention moving outward now, scanning the edges of the structure, the shadows, the spaces between. Parked cars, like whatever had just happened was not over, just interrupted. I took a small step back without thinking, my body finally catching up with the part of me that understood I should not be here, that I had crossed into something I could not see but could definitely feel. "I should go," I said, the words sounding weaker than I wanted them to, like they belonged to someone else. His gaze did not follow my movement. It held steady, fixed, like distance did not change anything. "No," he said, and it was not loud, not forceful, but it landed with more weight than if he had raised his voice. I froze again, frustration flickering under the fear, because I was not used to being told I could not leave, not like this, not by someone I had just met. "I helped you," I said, my voice steadier now. "I am not a threat." Something almost like amusement touched the edge of his expression, but it disappeared before I could be sure it was real. "That is exactly why you cannot leave," he replied, and the logic in his voice made it worse, not better. One of the men approached him, leaning in slightly, speaking in a low voice that I could not fully hear, but I caught fragments, words like perimeter and secondary check, and it sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the rain. The man nodded once, then looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift behind his eyes, not cold, not distant, something calculating, like a decision was forming in real time. "You were close enough to see," he said slowly, "close enough to notice what others would miss." I shook my head. Instinctively, my hands lifting slightly, palms open, like I could push the implication away. "I told you. I did not know anything. I just reacted. People do not react like that without reason," he said, stepping closer now, not threatening, but impossible to ignore, his presence filling the space between us in a way that made everything else fade. I could smell the faint trace of something expensive, clean, completely at odds with the cold concrete and damp air around us. "Then maybe I am." Not like other people, I said before I could stop myself, and the words hung there, bold in a way I did not expect from myself. For a second, nothing moved, nothing shifted, and then something in his expression changed again, subtle but real, like I had said something he had not anticipated. Behind him, the men had finished whatever quiet checks they were doing, but they did not relax. They watched, always watched, like this moment mattered more than anything else happening around us. Lily, he said again, quieter this time, like he was anchoring the moment with my name. You pulled me away from something that was meant to happen. The way he said meant made my stomach tighten, like this was not just coincidence, not just bad timing, but something planned, something deliberate. And now, he continued, his voice dropping just enough that it felt like it belonged only to the space between us. Whoever set that up will want to know why it failed. The realization hit me slowly, then, all at once, like the ground shifting under my feet, and I felt the air leave my lungs as the meaning settled in. I had not just stepped into his world, I had changed something inside it, and whatever had been waiting for him was not gone. It was still out there, adjusting, recalculating, and now, somehow, I was part of that equation. I swallowed hard, my earlier instinct to leave replaced by something colder, sharper, a quiet understanding that walking away might not be as simple as turning around. His eyes held mine, steady, certain, and when he spoke again, it was not a warning, not a threat, just a fact stated with quiet finality, which means you are not safe on your own anymore. I did not realize I had stopped breathing until my chest started to ache, the kind of ache that builds slowly, quietly, until it forces you to notice it, and suddenly everything felt too close, too heavy, like the air itself had weight. That is not your decision to make, I said, the words coming out sharper than I expected, because something inside me refused to accept what he was saying, refused to accept that my life could shift this quickly without my permission. His expression did not change, but there was something in his eyes now, something steadier, more focused, like resistance did not surprise him, like he had expected it. It already was, he replied, calm, certain, and that certainty unsettled me more than anything else had tonight. I shook my head, taking another step back, putting space between us even if it did not feel like enough, my mind racing, trying to find something logical to hold on to, something normal. I have a life, I said, forcing the words out, grounding myself in them. I have a job, an apartment, people who expect me to show up tomorrow. I cannot just disappear because of something that might happen. The rain continued to fall around us, softer now, almost distant, like it belonged to a different moment, and for a second, I thought he might argue, might push harder, but instead, he just watched me, really watched me, like he was weighing every word I said against something only he understood. One of the men shifted behind him, stepping closer, his voice low but clear enough this time. We should move, sir. The word sir landed differently, confirming what I had already felt, what I had been trying not to fully acknowledge, that this was not just a man, this was someone people followed without question. He gave a slight nod, not taking his eyes off me, and then everything moved at once, the men repositioning, one heading toward a different vehicle, another scanning the entrance, their movements smooth, practiced, like this was routine for them. I stood there, caught between leaving and staying, between instinct and something else I could not name, and then he stepped closer again, closing the distance I had tried to create. Lily, he said, quieter now, and somehow that made it harder to ignore. You are thinking about what your life looks like tomorrow. I blinked, thrown off by how easily he read it, how accurately he named it. I am thinking about the fact that I should not be here, I corrected, but the words felt weaker now, less certain. You are here, he said simply, and there was no argument in it, no pressure, just a statement that settled into the space between us. His hand lifted slightly, not touching me this time, just hovering for a second like he was deciding something, and then it dropped again. Give me one night, he said, and this time, there was something different in his voice, something quieter, not softer, but more deliberate. One night to make sure this ends with you still having that life tomorrow. I hesitated, the request hanging there, heavier than it should have been, because it sounded reasonable, it sounded controlled, but everything about this situation was anything but normal. And after that, I asked, my voice lower now, more cautious. He held my gaze, steady, unflinching, and for a moment, I thought he might not answer, but then he did, and the honesty in it caught me off guard. After that, he said, you decide what happens next. It should have reassured me. It should have given me something solid to hold on to, but instead, it made something shift inside me again, because I realized this was not just about safety anymore, not just about tonight. This was about a line I had already crossed, a moment I could not take back. Behind him, the car door opened, the quiet click echoing in the space like an invitation I had not agreed to accept. I looked at it, then back at him, my pulse still unsteady, my thoughts tangled, and for the first time since this started, I felt something else beneath the fear, something quieter, more dangerous, curiosity. One night, I repeated, almost to myself, and the moment the words left my mouth, I knew there was no clean way out of this anymore. I should have walked away right then, before the door opened, before the decision settled into something real, but my feet did not move. And that was the first mistake I understood too late. The car waiting for us was not the one that had been parked before. This one was different, darker, untouched by the chaos that still lingered behind us, its engine already running with a quiet, controlled hum that felt almost deliberate, like it had been prepared long before I agreed to anything. One of the men stepped aside, holding the rear door open without looking at me, his posture respectful but firm, like refusal was not part of the options he expected. I hesitated just a second longer, my eyes flicking back to the empty space where the other car had been, where everything had changed in less than a heartbeat, and something in my chest tightened again. A reminder that whatever normal I had before was already slipping out of reach. Lily. His voice came from just behind me, closer than I expected, steady and quiet. You said one night. I closed my eyes briefly, grounding myself in that single fact, in the choice I had made, even if it did not feel entirely like mine anymore. And then I stepped forward, sliding into the car before I could think about it again. The door shut with a soft, final click, sealing me inside a space that felt nothing like the cold, wet world outside. Everything here was controlled, warm, the faint scent of leather, and something clean wrapping around me like a contrast I had not asked for. He entered from the other side a second later, the movement smooth, effortless, like he belonged in every space he occupied. And the moment he sat down, the car began to move without a word, pulling away from the parking structure as if nothing had happened at all. I stared out the window at first, watching the rain blur into streaks of light, my reflection faint against the glass, unfamiliar in a way that made me uneasy. I became aware of the distance between us, not physical, but something else, something heavier, shaped by everything I did not know about him and everything he seemed to already understand about me. Where are we going? I asked finally, my voice quieter now, the edge from before softened into something more cautious. Somewhere you can sleep. He replied, like it was the simplest answer in the world, like this was just a normal night, and not the aftermath of something that should have never happened. I let out a small breath, shaking my head slightly, because that was not what I meant, and he knew it. No, I said, turning toward him now, meeting his gaze fully for the first time since we got in. Where are you taking me? His eyes held mine, steady, unreadable for a moment, and then something shifted, just slightly, like he was deciding how much to say. Somewhere no one else can reach you, he answered, and the words settled into the space between us, heavier than before, because now they felt real. I looked away again, back toward the window, but I was not seeing the city anymore. I was seeing the pattern forming beneath everything, the quiet control, the way every step seemed planned even when it felt spontaneous. You do not trust me, he said after a moment, not as a question, just an observation. I almost laughed at that, the sound catching in my throat before it fully formed. I do not even know you, I replied, because that felt more accurate than anything else I could say. There was a pause, brief but noticeable, and then he leaned back slightly, his posture relaxing just enough to feel intentional. Adrian, he said, offering the name like it was something measured, something chosen. I turned back to him, studying his face again, committing it to memory this time, because something told me I would need to remember every detail. Adrian, I repeated softly, testing the weight of it the same way he had done with mine. and for a second, something almost human crossed his expression, something that did not belong to power or control, something quieter. The car continued moving. Through the city, the rain easing into a light mist now, and I realized with a slow, sinking clarity that I was no longer counting how far we had gone or how long it would take to get back, because a part of me already knew that going back would not be as simple as retracing the road we had just left behind. The city changed the further we drove, not in a dramatic way, but in the details, the kind you only notice when you are looking for something familiar and cannot find it. The streetlights grew farther apart, the sidewalks cleaner, the buildings taller and quieter, like even the noise knew it did not belong here. I kept my eyes on the window, tracking reflections more than the road, trying to map something in my head that would let me feel in control again, but every turn blurred into the next. And the realization settled deeper with each passing block that I was not going to remember how to get back. The car slowed, then turned into a private drive lined with low lights that glowed soft against the wet pavement, leading toward a building that did not need to announce itself to be understood, glass and steel rising into the night like it had always been there, untouched by everything below it. We came to a stop under a covered entrance, and for a moment, neither of us moved, the engine idling quietly, the world outside held at a distance. The door opened on my side before I could reach for it. One of the men standing there, waiting, not speaking, just present. I stepped out slowly, the air cooler here, cleaner somehow, and I felt it again. That shift, that quiet sense that I had crossed another line without fully realizing it. Adrian stepped out beside me, his movements just as controlled as before, his presence immediately changing the way the space felt, like everything aligned around him without effort. "This is not a hotel," I said, more to myself than to him, because I already knew the answer before the words left my mouth. "No," he replied simply, and then he gestured toward the entrance, not touching me, but guiding all the same. Inside, everything was quiet, not empty, but carefully maintained, the kind of quiet that comes from intention, not absence. The floors reflected light in a way that made every step feel deliberate, every movement visible, and I became aware of my own presence in a way I had never felt before, like I stood out here no matter how still I tried to be. We moved toward a private elevator, the doors already open as if someone had been expecting us, and I hesitated again at the threshold, that same instinct rising up, telling me this was the point where I could still turn around. "You said one night." I reminded him, my voice steady but quieter now, because everything here demanded it. He met my gaze, holding it for just a second longer than necessary, and then he nodded once, not dismissing it, not minimizing it, just acknowledging the boundary. "One night," he repeated. I stepped inside. The doors closed with a soft sound that felt louder than it should have, sealing us into a space that moved without any visible effort, smooth, silent, carrying us upward in a way that made my stomach tighten slightly. I watched the numbers change above the door, each one marking distance not just from the street, but from everything I had known before tonight. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was not empty. It was full of something unspoken, something waiting. When the doors finally opened, the space beyond was even quieter than before, a private floor, no noise from other rooms, no sign of anyone else. Just a long hallway lit by soft, indirect light that made everything feel unreal, like a place designed to exist outside of time. He walked ahead, not checking if I followed, as if he already knew I would, and I hated that he was right. At the end of the hall, he stopped, opening a door with a simple motion, stepping aside just enough to let me enter first. I hesitated only a second this time before crossing the threshold, because turning back no longer felt like a real option. The room was large, but not overwhelming. Everything placed with intention, nothing unnecessary, a space that felt lived in but controlled, like the person who owned it allowed only what he chose to remain. I turned slowly, taking it in, trying to understand where I was, what this meant, what came next, and when I looked back at him, he was already watching me, that same steady gaze, unreadable but focused. "You are safe here," he said. And the words should have reassured me. They should have settled something inside me. But instead, they made something else rise, something quieter and more unsettling. Because for the first time that night, I realized safety might come with a cost I had not yet begun to understand. I did not move right away, not because I was afraid, but because something about the room made me feel like I had stepped into a version of reality that followed different rules, quieter rules, ones I did not understand yet. My shoes were still damp against the polished floor, leaving faint marks that felt out of place against the perfection around me. And I became suddenly aware of how ordinary I looked here, how temporary I must seem in a space that felt permanent. "You can sit," Adrian said, his voice breaking through the silence, low and controlled, like everything else about him. And I realized he had not stepped further into the room. He was still near the door, watching, giving me space without actually giving up control. I let out a slow breath and moved toward the couch, my movements careful, deliberate, like I was trying not to disturb something invisible. The fabric was soft under my fingers, too clean, too precise. And I sat down slowly, my body finally registering the exhaustion that had been building since the moment the night began. "Water?" he asked, already moving toward a counter without waiting for my answer. And for a second, that simple action felt more disorienting than everything else, because it was normal, almost too normal. "Yes," I said quietly, my voice softer now, the edges worn down by everything I could not process all at once. He handed me the glass, his fingers brushing mine for just a fraction of a second, and I felt it. Not a spark, not something dramatic, just a shift, like contact carried meaning here whether I wanted it to or not. I pulled my hand back slightly, focusing on the water, on the simple act of drinking, grounding myself in something real, something I could control. He did not sit. He stayed standing, leaning just enough against the edge of the counter to appear relaxed. But nothing about him truly was. "You are trying to understand what this is," he said after a moment. And I looked up at him, the directness of it catching me off guard again. "I am trying to understand why I am still here," I corrected, my voice steady, because I needed to hold on to something, anything that felt like mine. His gaze did not waver, and for a second, I thought he might dismiss it, but instead, he nodded once, acknowledging it. "Like it mattered. Because leaving now would put you at risk," he said. And there it was again, that word, risk, like it had already attached itself to me whether I accepted it or not. I set the glass down carefully, my fingers lingering on it for a second longer than necessary, because the alternative was looking at him, and I was not sure I was ready for that again. "And staying here does not?" I asked, finally meeting his eyes, because if I was going to be part of this, even for one night, I needed to understand the terms. Something shifted in his expression, not defensive, not offended, just aware. "Staying here puts you under my protection," he said. And the way he said protection carried weight, not comfort, not reassurance, but something more absolute, something that did not ask for permission. I held his gaze, searching for something softer, something human, and for a brief moment, I found it, buried beneath everything else, a flicker of something that looked almost like restraint. "I did not ask for that," I said quietly. "No," he agreed, just as quietly. "But you still have it." The room fell silent again, but it felt different now, not empty, not tense, just settled, like something had been established between us whether I liked it or not. I leaned back slightly, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion I had been ignoring, my mind still racing but my energy fading. "So what happens now?" I asked, the question simple, but heavier than anything I had said so far. He straightened slightly, pushing off the counter, his attention sharpening in a way that made the air shift again, like whatever came next mattered more than everything before. "Now," he said, his voice lower, more focused, "we wait." I frowned slightly, confusion cutting through the fatigue, because waiting was the last thing I expected from someone like him. "For what?" I asked. His eyes held mine, steady, certain, and this time, there was no hesitation in his answer. "For them to realize you were there." The words did not land all at once. They settled slowly, like something sinking beneath the surface of my thoughts until I could not ignore it anymore. And I felt the shift again, deeper this time, more permanent. "They already know," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, because the idea felt too big to say out loud, too real the moment I did. Adrian did not answer immediately, and that silence told me more than anything else could have. He moved away from the counter, crossing the room, with the same controlled pace, stopping near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, his silhouette cutting clean against the dim light beyond. "Not yet," he said finally, his tone measured, precise, like every word had already been considered before it left his mouth. "But they will." I followed his movement with my eyes, my body still, my mind anything but, replaying everything from the parking structure, every second, every detail, searching for something I had missed. "Because of me," I said, and this time it was not a question. He turned slightly, not fully facing me, but enough that I could see his expression, calm, unreadable, but not dismissive. "Because you changed the outcome," he corrected, and the difference between those two things settled heavier than I expected. I stood slowly, the exhaustion still there but pushed back by something sharper now, something that refused to let me sit still while the world around me shifted without me. "So what does that mean?" I asked, taking a step closer, not toward him exactly, but toward the truth I needed to understand. His gaze met mine again, steady, focused, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room narrowed down to that single point of connection. "It means they will look for variables," he said, his voice lower now, like the words carried weight even in a space this controlled. "They will retrace everything, every second, every angle, until they find what does not belong." I felt my stomach tighten, because I already knew the answer before he said it. "And I do not belong," I finished quietly. He held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded once, confirming it without softening it. The reality of it settled in deeper this time, not as shock, but as something colder, something that stayed. I turned away slightly, my arms folding loosely, not for comfort, but to hold something steady inside me. "Then waiting does not sound like a good plan," I said, my voice steadier now, because fear had already done its part, and what was left felt different, more focused. Something shifted in his expression again, subtle, but there, like he had been waiting for that response. "We are not waiting for them to act," he said, stepping closer now, the distance between us closing without feeling forced. "We are waiting for them to make a mistake." I looked up at him, the words catching something in my chest, not reassurance, not exactly, but something close to understanding. "And if they do not?" I asked. His eyes did not waver, not even for a second. "They always do," he said, and the certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. The room fell quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. It felt sharper now, more aware, like everything had shifted into a different kind of stillness, one that existed just before something changed. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders easing just slightly, not because I felt safe, but because I understood the shape of what was coming. "And me?" I asked, because that part still felt unfinished, still unclear. He did not hesitate this time, not even for a second. "You stay where I can see you," he said, and the words were simple, but the meaning behind them was anything but. I held his gaze, searching again, and this time, I found it more clearly, not just control, not just calculation, but something else woven through it, something that felt almost like intention. "That sounds less like protection," I said quietly, "and more like control." For a moment, he did not respond, and the silence stretched just enough to matter. Then he stepped closer, not invading, not forcing, just enough that I could feel the shift in the space between us. "Sometimes they are the same thing," he said, and the calm way he said it made the truth in it impossible to ignore. I should have stepped back, should have created distance, should have reminded myself that this was temporary, that this was just one night. But I did not move, because for the first time since all of this started, I realized something that unsettled me more than anything else had. I was no longer just trying to leave. A part of me was starting to understand why he never did. The silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt charged, like something unseen had shifted into place and was waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And I stood there, close enough to feel the steadiness of him, far enough to remember that I should not get used to it. I looked away first, not because I lost the moment, but because I needed space to think, to remind myself that this was temporary. That one night still meant something, even if it no longer felt like a boundary I could control. I walked slowly toward the window, the city stretching out below in quiet patterns of light, every street moving without me. every life continuing as if nothing had changed, and for a second, I envied that distance, that normalcy that now felt just out of reach. "You are not afraid anymore," Adrian said behind me, his voice low, observant, and I let out a small breath. My reflection faint in the glass as I studied it like it might give me an answer. "I am," I said honestly, "just not." In the same way, I turned slightly, enough to see him again, still watching, still measuring. But there was something different now, something less guarded, like he was not just assessing a situation, but understanding a person. Before, I was afraid of what might happen. I continued, my voice steady despite everything. Now I am afraid of what already did. The words settled between us, and for the first time, he did not respond immediately, which told me more than any answer could have. A soft sound broke the moment, subtle but distinct, not from outside, not from the city below, but from somewhere deeper inside the space, something controlled, intentional. Adrian's focus shifted instantly, not abruptly, but completely, his posture straightening in a way that changed the energy of the entire room. "Stay here," he said, and this time it was not a suggestion, it was an instruction, calm but absolute. I did not argue, not because I had given up control, but because I understood enough now to know when something mattered more than my resistance. He moved toward the far side of the room, his steps quiet, precise, and I watched as he reached for a panel I had not even noticed before. Something built seamlessly into the wall, hidden in plain sight. It lit up under his touch, a soft glow revealing information I could not fully see from where I stood, but I did not need to read it to understand what it meant. Something had changed. He studied it for only a second before his gaze shifted back to me, sharper now, more focused than before, and I felt that shift again, not fear, not panic, but awareness, like the moment we had been waiting for had finally arrived. "They are faster than I expected," he said, almost to himself, but the words carried enough weight to reach me clearly. My pulse picked up again, not wildly, but steadily, like my body was preparing for something I could not yet see. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice quieter now, not weak, just controlled. He held my gaze for a moment, and this time there was no distance in it, no unreadable layer, just clarity. "It means they have already started looking," he said. The room felt smaller suddenly, not physically, but in the way the air settled, heavier, more focused, like everything outside these walls had shifted direction toward this single point. I swallowed. My earlier thoughts about leaving, about tomorrow, about normal life, fading into something less solid, less real. "And you?" I asked, because that part still mattered, still grounded me in something I could understand. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did, something that felt less like calculation and more like decision. "I do what I always do," he said, stepping closer again, closing the space between us. Not as a threat, but as something intentional, something chosen. I held his gaze, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that might suggest uncertainty, but there was none. "And what is that?" I asked quietly. He stopped just close enough that I could feel the steadiness of him again. That same presence that had pulled me into this night without warning. His voice lowered slightly, not softer, but more deliberate, each word placed exactly where it needed to be. "I make sure what is mine stays alive," he said. The words settled into me slowly, not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore. And for the first time since this began, I understood something with absolute clarity. I had not just stepped into his world, I had been